Dorothy Jane Scott was 32 years old in the year 1980. She was a single mother raising her 4-year-old son, Sean, in Orange County, California. Dorothy lived with her aunt and her own parent, who helped care for Sean. She worked as a secretary in a small Anaheim gift shop. She rarely dated and had no steady boyfriend. By early 1980, Dorothy's life was simple and predictable. But then something changed. In late winter 1980, Dorothy began receiving strange phone calls. The caller was always a man. Sometimes his voice sounded gentle and he said he loved her. Other times he screamed threats. He seemed to know personal details about Dorothy's life, even where she was that day or what she happened to be wearing. On one phone call, he told Dorothy to go outside and look at her car. When she did, she found a single dead rose on the windshield. On another phone call, he warned her that he was watching her and would kill her if he got the chance. Dorothy took action to protect herself. She began taking karate classes and bought extra locks for her doors. She even talked about buying a gun for self-protection. She changed her daily routines and routes, and her parents and coworkers noticed her growing anxiety. Dorothy and her mother reported the harassment to the police. However, this was 1980. There was no caller ID or cell phone tracking. Each time the man called, he hung up so fast that the police could not trace the number. Dorothy and her family were left to live in fear, not knowing who exactly was tormenting them or why. On the evening of May 28, 1980, Dorothy's life took a final, terrifying turn. That night, she drove to an employees' meeting in Anaheim. During the meeting, Dorothy noticed her coworker, 28-year-old Conrad Bostron, looking very ill with a red, swollen arm. Dorothy insisted on taking him to the emergency room at UC Irvine Medical Center. Another coworker, 18-year-old Pam Head, came along. On the way, Dorothy stopped at her parents' house in Staten to drop off her son Sean for the night. By around 10 p.m., Dorothy, Pam, and Conrad arrived at the hospital. Doctors quickly treated Conrad for a spider bite, which they think was a black widow. At around 11 p.m., the doctors were ready to discharge Conrad with a prescription medication. Dorothy offered to drive her white 1973 Toyota station wagon around the side of the hospital so Conrad wouldn't have to walk to the car. She told Pam to watch Conrad's prescription slip and went to use the restroom before bringing the car up front. A few minutes later, Pam and Conrad walked outside to the hospital exit, expecting Dorothy's car to pull up at any minute. They saw headlights coming around the corner towards them. It was Dorothy's Toyota station wagon, but the lights were on full high beam and they could not see the driver's face. Pam and Conrad waved and called out to Dorothy in her car, but the car did not slow down or stop. Instead, it sped past them and made a sharp turn out of the parking lot. Pam and Conrad ran towards the car, but it accelerated away and was gone into the night. They were stunned. Dorothy had to have seen them, yet drove off without stopping and picking them up. Conrad and Pam waited at the hospital for another hour or so, assuming Dorothy had suddenly faced an emergency and would be back to pick them up. By midnight, Pam and Conrad were convinced something was terribly wrong. They alerted hospital security and the police were called. Dorothy's parents, who had been asleep at home, were notified that their daughter was now missing. Around 4:30 a.m., Santa Ana police officers would discover Dorothy's car about 10 miles from the hospital. Dorothy was nowhere to be seen. Investigators realized this might not be an accident. Someone had likely kidnapped Dorothy and then torched the car to hide evidence. Dorothy's personal items, her purse, keys, and other belongings, were missing from the scene, suggesting the abductor took them as well. By sunrise, crime scene investigators processed the burned car. They found no fingerprints or no clues at all left in the charred metal. The fire had wiped out almost all forensic evidence. All police had were Pam and Conrad's eyewitness accounts of seeing Dorothy's car speed off into the night. About a week after Dorothy disappeared, her mother, Vera, answered a call at home. The voice on the line asked, "Are you related to Dorothy Scott?" When Vera said yes, the man calmly replied, "I've got her," and then suddenly hung up. After that, Vera and Dorothy's father, Jacob, started receiving calls like that about once a week. Each time, the same male voice would taunt them. Sometimes he whispered that Dorothy was alive and with him. Other times he laughed and claimed that he killed Dorothy. On one of these calls, the man mentioned the clothes that Dorothy had worn the night she went missing, a maroon blouse and a scarf, details that were never released publicly. This told police that the caller knew Dorothy personally or was intimately familiar with the details of the case. Dorothy's parents cooperated with law enforcement to try to trace the calls, but every time the man called, he hung up within seconds, always before police could locate him. These calls would continue for years. They usually came when Vera was home alone. Jacob rarely got to answer them. In April 1984, Dorothy's father, Jacob, actually got to answer one call. When he said he was Dorothy's father, the man immediately went silent and then hung up the phone. After that, the calls suddenly stopped, until another tragedy. On August 6, 1984, exactly 4 years after Dorothy disappeared, construction workers in Anaheim Hills found human bones while digging a trench under Santa Ana's Canyon Road. Nearby, they also discovered a silver watch and a turquoise ring. The watch's hands were frozen at around 12:30 a.m., roughly around the same time Dorothy's car sped away into the night 4 years earlier. Forensic experts quickly identified the remains as Dorothy's, using dental records to confirm it was in fact her. Because the remains were only bones, the medical examiner could not determine a cause of death. Dorothy's skull and skeleton showed evidence of long-term exposure to the elements, so whatever killed her was impossible to tell. That same exact day, newspapers reported that Dorothy's remains had in fact been found. When Dorothy's parents saw the headlines, they received one last call from their tormentor. Vera answered to hear the same voice ask softly, "Is Dorothy home?" When she answered that Dorothy wasn't home, the caller hung up the phone. After that, there were no more phone calls. Investigators and armchair theorists have floated many theories about who in fact was behind all of this. The caller seemed to know Dorothy's habits and schedule, which suggests that he might have been close to her. Rumors have pointed to a man who had worked in the same area and was reportedly infatuated with Dorothy. However, the Orange County Sheriff's Department never publicly confirmed any suspect by name. Dorothy's two co-workers that night, Conrad Bostron and Pam Head, say that they saw her the whole evening and never noticed anything unusual. Police found no evidence tying any of her friends or colleagues to this crime. In short, no acquaintance of Dorothy has ever been officially linked to her disappearance. Another theory is that Dorothy's stalker was a complete stranger, someone who secretly followed her and learned her routine. It's possible that a predatory stranger observed Dorothy over time, which could explain how he knew so many of her private details. In some rare cases, attackers do study victims from afar before striking. However, stranger abductions of this nature are uncommon, especially with the kind of prolonged taunting that happened in this case. The intensely personal nature of the calls make many experts think it was more likely someone with an obsession, though a careful stranger cannot be completely ruled out. Some people wonder if a serial killer might have been involved. Orange County in 1980 had no active serial murderer fitting this pattern. The mix of kidnapping and persistent phone harassment did not match any other case in the region. Police did not link Dorothy's case to any other known crimes of the time. Criminal profilers generally think it was one obsessive individual, not a random serial predator. Could two people have been involved? One kidnapper and another to make the phone calls? Investigators believe this is very unlikely. The same man's voice was on every phone call, and presumably the same person set the car on fire. It would have been very difficult for two criminals to keep this scheme secret for 4 entire years. Most experts say it appears to have been one lone stalker and murderer carrying out the entire plot. There was also speculation about Dorothy's personal history, such as the father of her son, a man named Dennis Terry. Dorothy had a casual relationship with Dennis for years beforehand, and he lived out of state by the year 1980. Police looked into him and quickly ruled him out. There was no motive or evidence linking Dennis to this crime, and Dorothy was not involved with dating anybody else at the time. That means the caller's ramblings about jealousy were likely lies to cause pain, not clues of a real suspect. Despite all of the theories, Dorothy Jane Scott's case has never been solved. No one has ever been charged in her disappearance or murder. Dorothy Jane Scott wasn't living a dangerous life. She was a young mother working a normal job, trying to keep herself and her son safe. And that's why this story still sits so heavy. Because after all of these years, there is still someone out there who knows exactly what happened to Dorothy Jane Scott. Someone who lived their entire life with the truth. And unless they come forward, this case will likely stay frozen in time. A reminder of how terrifyingly thin the line is between safe and targeted. If you found this video interesting, consider subscribing to the channel. I cover strange mysteries, unsolved cases, and stories that keep you thinking long after the video ends. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.